Good evening and welcome to Visitor News Live. I'm Michelle Bernard, your producer and Visitor News editor. And tonight we're talking about mental health and what we can do to improve it, especially in this hard time of the coronavirus. So throughout the night, I'll be monitoring our Facebook and YouTube pages. So we want you to share your thoughts and your questions throughout the program, and we'll ask our guests. So tonight our host is Celeste Ryan Blyden. She's the visitor editor, and our guests are Dr. Mayuri Thomas. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she goes by Maya. Dr. Marissa Leslie. She's the system medical director of psychiatry at Adventist Healthcare, and Pastor Patrick Graham. He's the director of children's and youth ministries at the Allegheny East Conference. So let's start with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the Sabbath and this time to make time for you and to rest in you. Please join our conversation and let it be helpful to the listeners. Thank you so much. In your name, amen. Celeste?
Amen. Good evening, everybody. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Good to see you all. People I admire so much, people I consider friends and, really experts. We're so glad to have each of you. Dr. Thomas, Dr. Leslie, Pastor Graham. Here we are, 19 months in to Rona, as some people call her, COVID-19, coronavirus. We call her Rona where I live. And I will never forget, Dr. Leslie, we had Visitor News Live. It was the premier Visitor News Live. It was the first week of April. And you came on, you were our first guest. And we wanted to talk about mental health because we were hearing reports from all over the Columbia Union that pastors were struggling, members were struggling. Everybody was really just, filled with fear and anxiety over this new thing that was coming, They were saying we're going to kill a lot of people. And when I heard that even our pastors were struggling and not knowing what to say to members, I put the SOS. I called you. I said, please come. And I called Chaplain Black and some others. And I remember what you said, and I still hear it echoing in my head. You said, look, when they closed the schools, that's when panic set in. That's when this thing called COVID became real. And here we are, 19 months actually now, since this started. And I'm wondering, first of all, everybody, what has it been like, and what are you seeing in your work, in your clinical work, in your churches, the people that you have as clients? What are you seeing in terms of the pandemic? How's it been? What's it been like? And then how are you doing?
Well, I guess I can start since we started this together. I'm seeing some return to normalcy, but it's still different in that the children who are out of school, and many of them returned back in the spring, but the children who are out of school and have to now come back full-time, mask on, potentially quarantining, they're catching up. There was a lot of material lost, a lot of learning that was lost that they have to catch up on. The other thing we're seeing, not only mentally, but physically, people delayed a lot of physical care and mental health care. And there are conditions that are really unraveling: eating disorders, addictions. But one thing that encourages me is that people are reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are reaching out. Some people are experiencing major crises, suicidal thoughts, and other mental health crises, but they are reaching out more because mental health has been profiled and has been a little destigmatized a little bit during the pandemic.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I see you shaking your head, Dr. Thomas. Tell us what you've been seeing in your work.
I agree with a lot of what Dr. Leslie was saying. For me, because I do marriage and family therapy, so I do a lot of the relational work. And I see relationships. It's interesting because I see some of them thriving having to really work through things together. And then I see some that are, I call it the corona anxiety. I don't know, maybe that people already call it that. But this idea that what you're normally dealing with, the stressors you're normally dealing with, just feel heavier than they ever did before. Just the regular stuff.
Yeah.
So for my clients, there's this, I used to be able to handle this. I don't know why this is still bothering me. Work used to be good and work is now so stressful. Those types of things, because when we're living in this type of anxiety and fear, looking at the news, wondering, about our physical, our emotional safety, it's a burden. It's a heavy burden that I think people are trying to wrestle with. Some find that they're handling it better than they thought they would. And some are just really struggling. And I agree with Dr. Leslie about the amount that are reaching out and the destigmatization of mental health, because I think people are realizing it's gonna impact us. We can't pretend like these things don't impact us. It's impacting us. So I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about in a little while the ways that you have seen people reaching out, because that's talking about the healthy side of this. But Pastor Graham, I am particularly interested in hearing from you as well, because you minister to a lot of youth, children, youth, Pathfinders. You're working with the teens and everything. How are our young people handling all this? What are you seeing?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first thing I can remember when our administration told us, hey, we're closing down the office, we're closing down churches. I can see people were workers were probably like, yay, we snow day. Or it almost felt like a snow day when it first occurred. And then you started to actually know people in our conference and know people across our union that were not only sick, but dying from it. So now it starts to hit home a little bit. And then, I know we have the school system, and I like that comment in the very beginning, by once it started hitting the school, it goes right across the board. Why? Because look at our Pathfinder organization, which is the military of youth ministries. When you see that they cannot continue their curriculum, and which is, to be honest with you, the Pathfinder organization is the only ministry with a curriculum for boys and girls. When you see that start to go down and admin and AYS start to go, and churches being closed,
yes,
it also has, it almost feels like the plague is around you. How close is it to you? And then from a pastoral standpoint, church is the place where you come to get healing. Church, the church, inside the walls I'm talking about, you feel like you can touch the altar and be saved. And now you're helpless. Even as a pastor, you feel helpless that you cannot do anything for your members at that point. That is where the A-type personalities that we have, that's where depression starts to set in for us, because most pastors have that A-type personalities, and we strive when we're rubbing shoulders with someone.
Yes.
So to be home and to be alone, not necessarily lonely, but to be alone, still will do something to the pastor, and it has done for the work. It has really took a dip in the work.
Yes, I recently was speaking with a colleague who is single, and she's a young adult. She reaches out, she has friends, but to be home and working from home, she said, there are days that I'm just home, and she said the isolation after all these months, a year plus, the isolation has been starting to get to her, and she's just really struggling with mental health. And I think isolation was real, especially for the Adventist culture. We're a people who love events, okay? That's why I call us Seventh-day Eventists, because we go from event to event. Every Sabbath is a big event, okay? It even ends with potluck. And now potluck, you've canceled, like you said, the Pathfinder meetings. Look, it got real when they started canceling. Camp meetings were off, and graduations were off, and all these different events that Adventists kind of thrive on. What did you all see with the isolation? Any issues with isolation that you
You
saw?
know, I gotta say quite a bit with the isolation. And then to add to that, it's now I'm trying to weigh out, do I protect my physical health or my emotional health or my social health? Because now they're in conflict with each other a little bit. For some of my clients, they've been invited to different things, and trying to navigate that is a full session. How should I go? What should I, should I wear my mask? What if people aren't wearing masks? What if people aren't vaccinated? Some people don't believe in that. How should I navigate that? So some people just choose to stay home because it's safer. It feels safer that way. But then there's a cost to that too. So
Dr.
very,
Thomas, I was getting ready to come your way since you marriage and family, and nope, I don't want people to start picking on me or what I think. But living in your home, if there's a problem, and when I say there's a problem, every marriage has its ups and downs. And going to work, you can get away, or leaving out, you can get away. Now to live with a person who you may have some challenges with, and you're stuck in the house with them. I don't know. Don't write me and be like, "Is it you? Is it you?" I'm looking in your direction and saying, "Hey, marriage and family. For some, it may be a great building experience for them to be home together. On the flip side of it, it can be, living in Hades. You know what I mean? So,
Cabin fever. Got to
yeah,
get out of
yeah,
here.
and cabin fever. You just kind of say to yourself, okay, what more? And I go back to the pastoral work. Here you write sermons in order to speak outside. It's not the same with the camera in front of you. You don't. Some of our churches, we need to hear back from people. You know what I mean? We need to hear them so that we can
Amen.
get the
Amen.
loudest amens. Will keep another 30 minutes going or something like that.
Preach
Um,
it, Pastor.
yeah, right. Keep preaching, keep preaching. We don't have that anymore. But then, and that's why we have to learn. We have to learn how to do something new. We have to recognize that our sermons, my sermons, are no longer. It's no longer an hour.
That's right.
It's
That's
now
right.
20 minutes, because if you speak for 25, you're going to lose your audience. You know what I mean? So there's a lot that's hinging on isolation, being home, and what it does to your work, what it does to your family. But there are positive sides for it. I'll wait on it, but there's positive sides for
Yeah.
it. So,
We'll get to that.
and that's why I wanted Dr. Thomas. I wanted to say that in the marriage and family side.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. There is this type of, oh, wow, this pandemic has brought us closer together. We're navigating different things, and we've learned to problem solve and do conflict resolution. But I got to tell you, that's a little bit of the minority from what I see. And again, I'm just seeing the people who need a little bit of help. So maybe that's just me. But I do want to normalize it for those couples and families out there who are like, wow, I see a lot more of you than I have ever seen before. And I did not know that this is how you navigate X, Y, and Z. And I did not know, those are the type of things that are really, really tough for them to navigate through. And it's been a challenge. It has been a challenge finding my space, because everywhere I seem to run into you in this house. Where is my space? Those types of things.
Well, but you know what we haven't touched on yet, in our family, what I noticed, we have people who are widowed, right? Church has been a safety net for our singles, for our seasoned population, our older members. It really has been a safety net, and the pandemic has led to a lot of isolation for our older members, not only because of their physical health, but because they're not seeing anyone. People are trying to keep them safe. There's something called skin hunger. And I know that our older members felt skin hunger, but not just older members. I would even imagine some of our single members who were also perhaps trying to stay healthy and not go out there felt isolated. What is safe? When can I go out? I saw the isolation kind of at the height of last summer when it was just month after month after month. In our own family, just to respect privacy, we did have an older member. We ended up taking that family member out on drives just to kind of feel the outside, but not really be around too many people.
Yeah.
And it was a production to clean the car and make sure we had enough ventilation and that we had secure masks on. But it was essential because that person was really struggling with the isolation, really, really missing hugs and really, really missing the fellowship. Church really is a safety net and is such a source of community to so many people. And then I'll finally say, it's another kind of safety net too, to Pastor Graham's point. There are people who are experiencing abuse who have not been able to leave their homes yet. And they've been stuck in either verbally abusive situations, children who have been neglected, where they're not going to school and no one's capturing what's happening to them. I have seen some of that, but I'll end on a hopeful note. One youth that I treat, the parent struggles and the pandemic made it even worse. And the youth's sister's grandmother stepped in to raise her. And it is all the difference. And if anyone's listening, I think this is what it means to be church for each other, looking out for each other, not just thinking about our own homes, but what's going on. That's what church is all about. Church can be such a safety net for so many of us.
So can I get into I got to get with Dr. Leslie on this really quick. Another part of anxiety for the ministry is that church is it has to change now. It's no longer the same. What we went to seminary for, what we went to get our bachelor's in theology, those things that we learned has been turned upside down, and we now have to learn how to do new things, do it differently. Principles all remain the same, but we learned how to baptize. Literally, we learned how in class how to baptize. Those things are changing now, where the person may have to be baptized on their own, with somebody passing by, right? And then now you battle with those who say only ordained pastors can baptize, or only ordained deacons or elders can baptize. So the rules start to twist around, and then the things that you have believed in all your life is now on shaky ground because church is no longer in four walls. It's now become different. Pathfinder clubs now, we have come up with Moodle, which is an online way of teaching. It's not the same thing of learning your knots with each other, or putting a tent together with each other. So the word church has changed from bricks and mortar to people, which is supposed to be anyway, but it's changed to that. And so I agree with you, Dr. Leslie. It's I like that what you said about skin.
Skin hunger.
I was going to say, I learned a new word tonight. Skin hunger.
Yeah, I just wish we didn't have it here so I could preach about it next and sound like I knew what I was talking about. But, the skin hunger, that's just amazing, And we don't think about others. This is what I loved about what you just said. I'm here because I'm in youth ministry. I'm thinking about children, youth, Sabbath school, how to do it new, all of this. We got a whole new population that's supporting this church, who's really dying inside because they need that. Thanks, Dr. Leslie. It just never comes to mind until someone puts it out in front.
Now we've talked about, and thank you all for your comments. It's so good. I'm learning so much, Michelle, what's going on. But we want to hear from those of you who are watching. We've seen Fred is watching, and a couple other people popped in and said hello. We thank you for that. We'd love to hear from you about, what has the pandemic been like for you? We're 19 months in. Have you experienced isolation, as we talked about? Have you experienced cabin fever? Are you trying to get away from the people in your house? Trying to escape? Are your kids? How is it doing Zoom school? and everything. So talk to us. We want to hear from you tonight as well. If you're watching, we'll share your comments. The other thing, if you have a question for one of our professionals here tonight, we'd love to hear that. We'd love to tackle the questions that you have. But meanwhile, we're going to go on. We're going to just mention here, you were talking about the impact. And before we go on to some other ways of how we reach out and other things, CDC report said, anxiety and depression were up. Suicide is up. I mean, I've heard of people, yes, even Adventist people, suicide with this. And substance abuse. There's just a lot of ways that people have been trying to cope. What do you say to people right now who have been going through this and they're just tired of it and wish it would end? That's where I'm in. I'm in the camp of, I'm tired of this. It's just gone on too long. What do you say?
That's a Dr. Leslie question. I mean, the reason why I say that. And the reason why I said that, and I pointed in her direction, is because we're afraid. I won't say we're afraid. We're reluctant to medication. I've moved from my conference, have sent me to school to get my master's in mental health, and I'll be finishing. And at the end of this, gang, I have to tell you this: I'll be graduating in December. I'm in my internships, and I turn around and I don't think I've ever preached before. No, it's a totally different ball game from the pulpit now, right? That I remember preaching, God will heal you from your anxiety. Don't take meds. God will, go jog somewhere, drink a lot of water, get some sunshine. Pray on it. Come to Wednesday night prayer meeting, it'll go away, and over the past 2.5 years at WAU, I've learned it's opened up a whole different world. So when you made that comment just now about those who want to end it all and suicidal tendencies, or just running away, just going somewhere,
or self-medicating,
or self-medicating, drugs, alcohol, all of these things, we need to hit the professionals at that, and pastors are not your professionals at I just got to be honest with you.
So let's go there. Let's go there, doctors. Let's hear about it. Is prayer the only way? Now, we're praying people. Adventists are praying people, and we believe in the power of God and the healing power of God. And but talk to us about the needs there.
Well, let me pull a Jesus on you.
Okay.
And ask, is prayer the only way to heal cancer? Because just as we view cancer, I view severe depression. Just as we view diabetes, I view anxiety. Sometimes for diabetes, it's a matter of, hey, if you lose a little weight and you don't eat as many sweets and you watch your diet, your diabetes will go away. But sometimes you're in diabetic ketoacidosis and you need to go to the hospital. You may even need the intensive care unit.
Yes.
And mental health is no different. Sometimes you need the hospital. Sometimes you need medication. Sometimes getting more sleep and exercising will help. So to Pastor Graham's earlier points, those other things are not to be neglected. Definitely pray. Definitely go to prayer meeting. Definitely look for community. And sometimes you also need medication, therapy, journaling, a 12-step program. Because addiction, we don't talk enough about addiction in the church, but it's and several of us have struggled to the point where we should never have a touch of alcohol, not just because we're addicted, but because we're addicted. We shouldn't be around people who do that because it will trigger a relapse, which is the rule, not the exception. So for those faithful people out there who say, I've recovered from my addiction, I've been delivered, right? Yes, you may have been delivered for that moment. But because the way the brain works, you may experience a relapse. It doesn't make you any less faithful of a Christian, of an
Sure.
advocate, of a believer. It's a brain disease. It is
Mhm.
absolutely a brain disease.
Okay.
And yeah, and sometimes just go back, just like cancer, you may have a recurrence of cancer, you may have a recurrence of addiction or depression.
Wow.
Can I get with Dr. Leslie on something? I don't need meds right now. I'll let you know when I need it. But what happened to me personally with the pandemic, and it may sound foreign, but it made the world smaller to me and made me claustrophobic.
Mm.
So,
So tell us more about that. What do you mean?
well, what's happening here in the United States is not necessarily what's happening in Europe or in Africa or different parts of the Far East. Now everyone is, is suffering in the same way. They're all dying the same way. They're all sick. The same type of sickness is going all through the world. To me, it made the world smaller. In other words, there was no escape. There's nowhere to go.
Mhm.
So I could not say to myself, let's run away and go to Jamaica, where our family is from. It's there too. Let's go to the Bahamas. It's there too. Okay, let's go to Alaska. Well, it's there too. So what happened to me is that I caught a mental block that made me feel like there was no escape, and my anxiety levels started to rise. Not regular anxiety, but sickness anxiety. You know what I mean? I didn't want to watch TV anymore. I didn't want to watch CNN. I didn't want to watch anything at all, because anything that I watched would make me feel as though it was at my door knocking. Knocking at my door. So
Yeah.
that was personal for me. And I did find a solution. And the quick solution was Jesus Christ. That's for me, though. It can't be for everyone else. But I knew where I was, where I couldn't sleep, and throwing up, and close to panic attacks again, just because of this pandemic. I'm glad that I've seen a way out, and I think that once I started to go 3-4 weeks like that, then I knew that I needed to do something about it. It was a little bit longer than 3-4 weeks, by the way, to recovery. Not all the way there yet,
Mhm.
but definitely on a good trip, on a good road up.
Thank you for
Graham. I'm sorry. Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to just throw out advice. I want to share that
Sure.
we struggled too. I struggled. I was in and out of the hospital, right? Especially, well, definitely just throughout. And I wasn't just worried about my family's health, but my staff's health and our patients, of course. Am I going to transmit asymptomatic COVID? Am I going to contact asymptomatic COVID? If you know me, you know I love to eat. I was down to 2 meals a day. I really wasn't sleeping much because it was just constant emails and phones and texts and what are we going to do and protocol this, protocol that, and the news. I was watching it, reading it incessantly, not to decrease my anxiety, but really to gain knowledge because we didn't know much about it. I wanted to make sure I knew all I could for my staff. So there was the beginning, and then it's still so long. I really missed my family. Of course, my family is here. Pastor Graham is my family too, through my husband. And there's my blood family that I couldn't see for months and months and months, including my parents. And I really started to feel like, am I ever going to see them again? When is this going to end? And so thank God I found the vaccination window. We took road trips and we were finally able to connect. And at the same time, I'm still feeling exhausted because I don't know when I can stop wearing a mask at work. I don't know when I'll be able to eat with my colleagues instead of just over Zoom or Teams. So it's getting tiring, but there are little bright lights where we can see each other during healthy times.
Wow. I was going to say, I thank both of you. Thank you, Pastor Graham, for sharing. And thank you, Dr. Leslie, as well, for just sharing the reality of what this is like. I think that we all can relate. As I said, we're 19 months in, and what started to get to me is just it won't end. And when you turn on the news, it's just a constant reminder. And every time I think that we're kind of moving past it, then something else happens. Colin Powell, passing away from COVID just hurt my heart. And every time you hear the next number, we're past 700,000 now. That's 700,000 people, 700,000 people who were family to somebody, 700,000 people who have a story, whose lives were cut short, and the impact of that every time you hear it. And and you are so right. You can't go to Jamaica; they're on lockdown too. You can't go to Hawaii; they were on lockdown too. There is nowhere to escape, and this thing is no respecter of persons. It doesn't care whether you're important or not important or whoever you are. It's coming for you, and it began to feel like, where can we go? Where can we escape? So, yeah, Dr. Thomas, if you want to get on this, and then we're going to go to the next question. But just before you do, let me say, anyone who's watching, if you want to share what your experience has been like, we'd love to hear it. Also, if you want to share how you've been coping, how have you been coping with this? We want to hear from you as well. So, thank you.
I loved what Dr. Leslie and Pastor Graham have been talking about as far as their own experiences, as far as going back to this idea of skin hunger and our bodies and needing these things. It has been generations and generations. I mean, generations since Adam and Eve. And our bodies and minds are not where it used to be. And we need each other in a particular way nowadays. That's different. And I think when we have experts who are learning different things, like about emotional health, like about brain health, and tying it into how we can help our physical bodies, I think it's just worth it to at least hear them out, and find out if that's something for you. So for me and my husband, it's been an interesting experience because if anybody knows my husband, Sanjay Thomas, he is an extrovert. He loves people. He can talk up a storm.
Love Sanjay. Shout out to Sanjay.
Yeah. And I'm the more kind of quieter, shyer, more of an introvert. So I don't mind home as much type of person. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we had different experiences of this pandemic. And I found myself, my love language is physical touch. I found that skin hunger thing to be real. I needed that. I needed touch. I needed hugs. I needed people. And it reminds me that we are social creatures, that God has created us to be social. And that's why the church is so important. And when we don't get that need met, it's like food, it's like water, it's like shelter. It's that important. And we don't get that need met in different ways. And then when there's trauma, because we're dealing with trauma at home, or we're dealing with the trauma of fear and anxiety, that constant anxiety, it's gonna wear and tear on our brains, on our minds. And there's no shame. There's no shame in needing to find out what are some solutions, what are some options for me. And I strongly believe that God has placed Christian counselors, Christian therapists, Christian psychiatrists, they're available for us. And for my husband, he found himself just talking on the flight to his clients. He'll be talking for an hour, just chatting with his clients. And they're like, okay, I got to go. But he's still chatting away, just trying to get that social need met, needing that fresh air, needing to be outside of the four walls. It's okay. Like for those of you listening, if that stuff is wearing you down and you find that you need to reach out, there's Christian mental health available for you. Mm-hmm. And I believe it is biblical, and I believe there is room. I mean, God is our great counselor, and he encourages us to seek out with each other. So that was kind of my thought.
Thank you. I just love this. This is such a great conversation. We thank you. Sanjay, you can call me. We'll talk, just whatever. Reach out. They were talking about that earlier. But let's talk about, we were talking a little bit earlier about the different people who have been impacted. Let's talk about famous people. Simone Biles. We all watch the Olympics in real time. We watch that whole thing play out in real time. And I don't think we know the end of it, or, what's going on behind, but we know that she suffered trauma and abuse. And here she was at the Olympics, the pinnacle, and the whole world is watching because, we're all on lockdown, so we can't go anywhere anyway. So we're all watching the Olympics. and we see what happens with her. Somebody, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Tom, talk about that situation with Simone and what is our takeaway from something like that. You know, tonight's program is taking care of our mental health like an Olympian, you know, and what do you think of all that?
Well, I have a huge amount of respect for Simone Biles. Some people would call her the GOAT, the greatest of all time when it comes to gymnastics. And even the greatest of all time, we're no match for trauma sometimes. A few things happened with Simone. She was re-triggered from the sexual abuse she experienced at the hands of the gymnast, the doctor for the gymnast. She didn't have the immediate support of her family because they weren't there with her. She also said that it's a huge source of support for her, and there were no crowds, and her family couldn't be there. She said it was very isolating. She also got the twisties, where there is this deep mind-body connection. When you're anxious, when your body when your mind isn't right, when you're going through something profound as trauma, re-experiencing, your body will react. It doesn't always behave the way you want it to. And Pastor Graham mentioned this earlier. He talked about vomiting. He wasn't being funny. When you're really anxious, you will vomit. You will have difficulty sleeping. You may lose weight. And her body is such a skilled machine, but because there was something wrong, she had to go through it. She had to go through it. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for Simone Biles for saying that my safety is important, my mental health is important. If she had fractured her leg, we wouldn't have questioned not 1 second why she took time away and why she didn't do all the events. But because it was a mental health issue, I'm embarrassed by the people who said she should be out there anyway. We should not promote that. People have to care for themselves. If she didn't do one more event, she's done enough. She really has. And I'm grateful she shared her journey with us. I'm sorry that she's going through that trauma and that she even had to experience it in the first place.
Yes.
Because it went too far, because people didn't listen. But we can learn from her experience that we have to care for ourselves, and that includes mental health. Sick days include mental health, and people, just because you don't have a fever, you have to take care of yourself, or else you will break down.
Can I just say about this, Simone Biles? I agree with everything Dr. Leslie said, everything absolutely about self-care and mental health. There's this attitude in American society that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you just keep going and you just keep going. And sometimes I think there's that attitude in our Adventist church too. You got to keep giving. You got to keep ministering. And I know pastors, and I know Pastor Graham can talk about this. There's this, it feels like a black hole of need that you just have to keep giving to and giving to when you're in ministry, when you're with your fellow congregation. And I think she's an incredible inspiration. I think she sparked a lot of really needed conversation about where's your line? When is it time to stop and take care of you? And I really appreciate it and respect her highly for that.
You're on mute.
We're talking about performance from Simone Biles. I want you to kind of see what it's like to be a president of a conference, to be let's take it to our churches, to be a pastor who there is a performance side to it, to those 40 minutes that he's standing up there or she's standing up there. There's a performance side of it. And there's also a measure of self-worth that's missing. We have the same thing as these kids have, who put something on Facebook and like to see the likes. or like to see the hearts on Instagram or something of that nature. You could imagine not being able to preach from here, because this is my pulpit now, right? To preach from here and not see who you're preaching to, or whether or not there's one person on there, or whether or not there's 100 people on there that's watching. It does something to your psyche. It does something to you when that happens. So when she stepped out and said, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling," I mean, it was to me, I applauded her. When I first came out and said that I'm struggling with anxiety, um, I've gotten emails from people that have said you're not a part of God. You're not you're not, it's satanic. Here's the one that got me. You're possessed. When I mean, these are the things that you hear. Now when you come down to the pandemic, those are certain things. Sticks and stones may break your bones, words will never hurt you. That's a lie. You know, those things still, you try to figure out, am I going back to feeling this way? Am I going back to wanting to impress? Now here we are, and some of you may understand this. Here we are in the fourth year. Fifth year is coming up to where there's election time coming. Normally, this is how we do. We put people in who being seen, if you're being seen. And now we're at a place where you're not being seen anymore. As a youth director, you have so many plans. When you have close to 200 kids that you no longer can have Camp Danny Davis or a camp for them, and now parents are calling like, I don't care about COVID, I need them out my house, or whatever the case. You feel like, but here's what happens: you want to put on this cape,
Yes.
all right, with the big
Superman
on the back, yeah. And I remember I put in a proposal because Pine Forge did it. Pine Forge is a boarding school who had no COVID cases at all. They lived in a bubble. And I said, I could do the same thing with Alleghany's kids. I could do it. I could do it. And for them to say, no, you feel like there's a rejection. You feel personally rejected when it's not personal. They're really taking care of the kids. They're really taking care of parents. Forget lawsuits and all that. We're not even into that. We're into keeping everyone safe. It does something to your psyche. It makes you feel like you're not working anymore. It makes you feel like you are in sports and you hurt your leg and you're out for the season. So it's something that you have to come back with. And that's why Dr. Thomas, I wanted to say this, and I don't want to go dismal. You have to depend on a higher power to bring you back. You have to depend on a higher power to keep you stabilized, right? And that's why I didn't want to run away from the medication side of it, because in the very, very beginning of my anxiety, I had to take Valium. I had to take medication in order to get to where I am now. Don't want to go back there, but if I have to, I will. You know what I mean? There's no second guessing it. So there are coping mechanisms that we need to be able to go back to, and that's what I really want people to know, that God is a provider. To stay in the Word, to listen to uplifting music. These are the things. Hold on. Here's another thing. I have to start eating right. I'm telling you, there's literally foods that cause your anxiety to go up, pressure to go up. So I gotta be hydrated by drinking water. So all of those things come to play. So I want us to know that even though it's there's a way out. The question is when. And we have to hold on until we get to the way out of this, even though we're in the middle of the tunnel.
Go ahead. And then I want to say something, because I want to lose this point. We're making a connection. We're making a connection between Simone Biles, who we watched publicly, and our own selves, which we are living privately, many of us, some of us publicly. If you're in certain positions, it's more publicly, but privately. So in other words, Simone Biles isn't the exception, okay? We are all in this. And you made a comment earlier about Dr. Leslie, there's a powerful mind-body connection.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, so just talk about this a little bit about, how can we work through this? So go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
I was just going to speak right to that, because what Dr. Leslie and Pastor Graham were sparking this idea. We're still figuring out what trauma does to us physically and neurologically. We're still trying to figure out what trauma actually does to us. So when Pastor Graham says I needed to take Valium, it literally can sometimes change your brain chemistry. And I know Dr. Leslie can speak more about this too, to where it's like cancer. It comes in and it changes your body to where you want to function a particular way, but there is no way to do that. And that is what that medication does. And so for us, we talk about trauma. She had some significant, we call it big T, a big T trauma, sexual abuse, that's big T. But there's also little T traumas when they add up, like being isolated, like being pulled away from your loved one, or not being able to not having control and autonomy over your life. Those are little T's, and they impact our body. They impact our brains. And so I really appreciated kind of that conversation. I wanted to jump in and say, we're still understanding that, and there's a need to understand more about it.
Thank you. This is so important. If you're watching and you have something you want to share, we would love to hear from you. But let's talk about, Dr. Leslie, you had a Bible example. Talk to us about Martha and Mary. How did they relate and deal with these kinds of issues, and what healthy boundaries did they create?
Yeah, but I'm the pastor. She should be talking about medical stuff.
Come on.
You've
been there. We can break them down as a case study.
Earlier, you asked, how was the pandemic affecting us? And I will be bold enough to admit that I have appreciated Sabbath being Sabbath, and not having to go from meeting to meeting, from church club, for our daughter, to church club, but truly just being able to have breakfast with my family, listen to the word, spend time in the Sabbath school lesson with our daughter. And so I'm going to tie this to Martha and Mary. I would love for the church to have an honest conversation, and because the church is us, about the mental health of the church. And I don't mean the schizophrenia, depression mental health. I mean, the way we do church, has that been healthy? And to Pastor Graham's earlier points, what needs to change about church? Because I know what needs to change for us. Once we actually go back in the building, when the little one is vaccinated, church is going to be different for us. It is going to look a lot more like being church to our community, being there for people who are isolated, being there for people who need us, and saying no more.
Oh, no.
Simone Biles taught us.
There's no such word in Adventist church to call no.
Right. But Martha, for Martha, there's no. For Martha, it's, don't you see me working here, Lord? Tell Mary to help me. Because Martha's all about the display, the potluck, and making sure that the elders are fed first. But Mary is about sitting at the feet of Jesus. And I believe that COVID is teaching us how to sit at the feet of Jesus. Wow. How to weep our traumas out, how to rejoice, how to just learn from him, how to be still, and how to truly commune instead of just this facade of busyness and I'm so working for the Lord, I'm just so busy. And there are times when, the person who has chosen the greater part is the Mary, the person who will slow down and be fed of the Lord so that we can impart.
Listen.
Wow.
I'm going to brag on this. We thought we were going to get hit in this pandemic for our churches where the finances of our conferences would have gone down.
Right.
It flipped and it went up. That ought to tell you something. What happened in ministry is that we have to go bare bones with the ministry and take off the fluff. And people accept the bare bone gospel ministry, and let's stop dressing it up. I grew up, as you know, cousin. I know. You know how we grew up. We grew up ties. You know, especially if you're from the Caribbean, down south. You grew up with ties. You wear your ties. You wear your jackets. You can never preach without that.
Mhm.
And look at where we are in the pandemic. Nobody cares about what you're wearing anymore. They want to know the solid truth. I don't get up anymore and I say, hey, you know, I want to bring greetings from from President Pete Palmer and Secretary. We used to get up and say that. They'll take like 10 minutes just to introduce where you coming from and what you. Nobody cares about that anymore. They don't want to hear that. Give us the solid word, sit down, or else I'm going to press end on my Zoom, or I'm going to press end on my. You see where everybody is. This is not cookie cutter anymore.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
let's get straight to the point. My offering is already there because I'm giving it to you from my heart. I don't need the music for you to give me offering. I don't need all of that. Just give. And look where church has gone.
Mhm.
Church has really got to the place of baptisms. Literal baptisms are happening, right?
Mhm.
And if you're not up to speed,
Mhm.
Celeste, I can press a button and find myself down in Huntsville.
Hello.
I can press a button and find myself in Tennessee at
Look,
Southern.
look, I'm
You know,
3 church services every Sabbath. Okay.
right,
Family time, 3 church
right. So
services.
you have to be at your best, right? I want to say this for Dr. Leslie too. Yeah, I've gotten closer to my family.
Mhm.
The Sabbath is no longer a day of work for me. The pandemic has brought my Sabbath day to a real Sabbath day. So I go to CNO Canal and I'll walk 4 or 5 miles. Those are the times when I can have honest conversations with my wife. Not flyby conversations, real conversations about what's going on, what's really happening, how I really feel about you, how you really feel about me, which I didn't want to hear. You know, went hiking, not Pathfinder hiking, but hiking. It didn't take. The Sabbath became real recharging time, and that's what the pandemic has done for me. It has taken me out of traditional religion
Mhm.
and it's put me in a place where I have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Wow.
That's what it has done.
Dr. Thomas, I see you over there. How I love this talk about the Sabbath. You know, we went to Martha and Mary, and now we're bringing it home to our lives, the Sabbath. What is it? What's it been like for you?
I am just resonating with what these two are sharing here, just resonating hard. As somebody who's a little bit quieter, our Sabbaths were packed. Like there was church, and then there was somebody's house for lunch, and then we were socializing there. And then maybe we go back to church, or then we're dealing with, another family that we're kind of trying to socialize with and get some time in. It was packed. We didn't get home till late on Sabbaths. So it has been a time of refreshing. I mean, when Dr. Leslie was talking about sitting at the feet of Jesus and crying it out, like there has been some Sabbaths where it's my mental health Sabbath and I journal and I cry and I share with my God, and it has been so edifying. So I'm just resonating with everything people are saying.
Wow. Let me tell you, I will tell you about my family. We run, run, run. We're going all the time. We're going every which way. We got 2 girls, 12 and 10, and they're into everything. Okay. So, you all can relate. They're going and doing. And this thing, I have called it my oasis in time. It has been such a blessing. I have, my heart has gone out to those who have been hurting and suffering. We all have, of course. But I have said, this thing is sweet. This is just a moment in time that I can be a mom on Sabbath and be a wife. And you know what? We make nice lunches now, make nice lunch spreads, because we're not going to potluck and all that stuff. We're making beautiful spreads. The Lord said to me that how I take care of my family is an act of worship. And so we're home, but we make nice dishes and we bake together. We're all in the kitchen, meal prepping and doing stuff together and putting a nice spread out. It's not for company, it's for us. I love that. Now, we used to be the family that on the way to school in the morning, okay, real talk. It's like on the way to school, somebody read the devotional, somebody pray in the car, say your memory verse while you're at it, right? Now we actually, in this pandemic, we have worship twice a day. We have worship in the morning over breakfast. We're reading the devotional. In the evening, we're actually singing hymns at the table or whatever song they want to choose. That didn't happen before the pandemic.
Right.
Okay. That happened when I grew up, because I grew up in a West Indian Caribbean home. And,
Wait a minute, and I understand now you're doing Pathfinders now. I understand.
yes, we're doing Pathfinders now. But you know what I'm saying? Like, the pandemic created the space for us to take time. And now that we're coming out of it, my husband and I are determined not to let that go. We want to hold on to that. We want to enjoy our Sabbath.
Moderator, can I go back to something that I really wanted to bring out, that
Please.
if we can, I think about all of us in the union who have lost President Fordham and his wife,
Yes.
and can you imagine in the pandemic, you're still hurting over something else, the loss and the pandemic, not being able to say, here's another thing with pastoral ministry, not being able to say goodbye properly,
Yes.
knowing that this is going to sound crazy, but 800, 900 people showed up. But if it was no pandemic, we could have said goodbye better with about 10,000 people showing up. It's that's the reason why I love what you were saying. We need to become closer to family, because this is who we really have. We only really have our family when you really look at it. So church always starts at home, so it doesn't, if that's what I want to share with everyone, go back to reading your word, unpack it, sit down Friday nights, watch Chosen,
And Visitor News Live. Watch Visitor News Live.
Yes, Visitor News Live. Right. And after that,
Chosen, right.
Sit down with your family and have conversations.
Yeah.
My kids are grown, but it's still good to have them on, talk to them, have a conversation with them, because the pandemic is doing something to them too. And this is what I wanted to tell you. The young people of our churches don't care anymore. They want to be together. So you can open any church, they can get sick. They don't really care. They feel like they're invincible anyway. They'll get in the car and drive 90 miles per hour. Doesn't matter. 18, 19, 20 years old. They want to see each other. They want to protest. They want to do everything, right? But yet through all of that, of them wanting to come together, we still have to keep in front of them health. This is one thing I love about the Adventist church, which we stopped teaching. The health message is bigger than we think it is. I have a family member who, doesn't want to take the vaccine, but because of her lifestyle, all right, I believe that we should take the vaccine, but I'm saying that if the lifestyle that we have, Adventism builds upon what we eat, what we drink, how we work out, our health, all of those things, what we should continue to teach our young people. Take the time now to teach the next generation. I know I'm going long on this, but 2001, when September 11th happened, the world changed. And we accepted the change of the world. I remember taking my own food on the airplane. My parents you could walk somebody all the way up to the gate back then. All those things changed and we accepted it. When it comes to this pandemic, church has to change, and we're going to have to get to a point of understanding that is more now relationship with God than to be a traditional religion that when something happens to the church, something happens to us. No, I mean the church building, something happens to us. No, get back into your word and get back to family.
And Pastor Graham, relationship with each other too. I love everything you're saying, because we have to be our brother's keeper. I love what you said, Celeste, that being with your family is an act of worship. I love that. I am also mindful of those whose families, and Dr. Thomas can attest to this, doing it because of what you do, whose families are toxic. Some of us have removed ourselves from our families intentionally and had to create new family. So I'm really hopeful that the pandemic has allowed for the creation of new family. And for those of us who are single to have found that community. But it's relationship with God and it's relationship with each other. And now we have to be very intentional about those relationships.
I agree 100%. And I love it, what you're saying. And also our neighbors, like literal neighbors. I have started reaching out to my little neighborhood. I didn't even know them, just because we just have each other now. Like if everything goes, if the electronics are down and everything, we just have each other here on this block.
That's
So
right.
I echo that. I second that wholeheartedly.
This is great. This has been so rich and just really good to spend time with you. I feel like we're having like a session right now where we're all kind of sharing and everything. So I hope it's been meaningful. But before we go, I mean we're at our time, but I just want to leave us with some takeaways and some tips. I want to hear from each of you. Give us one tip, something that you've learned through this whole pandemic that you can share with us, because we're all family.
Well, I'm happy to start. I've learned so much. It's going to be hard to whittle it down to one, but
Well, you can share too. It doesn't. Just share. Just give
when,
us lessons learned.
when we slow down enough to notice the things around us, for me and my husband, we've noticed our daughter a lot more. We have sat down and eaten the things she's made for us and done the activities. Pastor Graham, you would be surprised at your cousin doing embroidery with his daughter. Um, when we slow down,
That's beautiful.
and our children really have needed us more, and just listened to their fears, but also learned more about them and help promote their talents and their interests, instead of, I'm on this meeting, I'm doing this, but just, you know what, do not disturb. It's time. It's our time. You have my undivided attention. I have learned the beauty of undivided attention because this pandemic has been so hectic. It's really important to have undivided attention.
I love it. I love it.
I guess for me, I'd just add to that, like we've been talking about, especially Pastor Graham, taking care of my physical body. This has been rough. This has been rough. I mean, I used to go to the gym. I used to do yoga more. I just haven't. And so I'm slowly getting back into it. And I realize how good I feel when I do these things, when I drink enough water, when I eat. So for me, a big tip, which I think is extra important during this time, is to take care of our physical bodies as much as we take care of our social, emotional, same thing.
Social, emotional, and physical. Yeah.
I have to say that I realized, I'm going to go with Dr. Leslie on this piece. I realized that a lot of things that I was doing before the pandemic was no earthly good and would not echo into eternity. And so I've taken more time to make music. I've taken more time to read. I mean, I used to read all the time. Now I read. I know this is crazy, but my brother and I used to play PlayStation games together. Just us. Nothing on. And we've started doing that over the past month or so. Spending more time, just more time with things that really make sense. It's the pandemic, but if I should die of anything else, pandemic is one thing, but death is so final. I think I count the hours, that you take the time out. So I'm going to piggyback and say, slow down and enjoy life. The pandemic is here. I don't see where it's going, but don't fear that. I really needed God in this. Not my parents, not our family. We've had death in our family. Dr. Wherever you are, Marissa, Dr. We had death in our family, which was very difficult over COVID because we love to come together, even if it's a death or a marriage. We've had marriages and we could not come together on it. Take the time to slow down. I'm with you on that. Let's just slow down and watch God do his thing. Let's do it.
Beautiful. For me, lesson learned was taking responsibility for my kids in greater ways than before. So when they Zoom school started and they had to be home, all of a sudden the kids were coming to me saying, "Mommy, help me with this." I reviewed work. I reviewed their work after school before, but now it's in the middle of the school day and I'm here working here, teleworking, and they're in there and they come, "Mommy, help me with this in this workbook and whatever." And I got to see a whole lot more
It's new
of what
math.
they were doing in school and this new math and
Yeah.
all the stuff they were doing, and so I got to see that, but then also taking more responsibility for their spiritual education, not just sending them to Sabbath school. Now we're on Zoom Sabbath school. So I'm in Sabbath school watching and seeing what's going on. And then, in Pathfinders, they have these Bible readings that they have to do. Well, they didn't go to the Pathfinder meeting to go do that. Now they're at home and we're sitting around the table doing their Pathfinder Bible reading assignments and projects and everything. So, taking more responsibility for our own spiritual education and health and all of that, not just sending them off to someone else to do it for us. And I've really enjoyed that. So I hope we don't go back to some things. What do you hope we don't go back to? I just have to prolong it one more moment, Michelle, because I think we all could relate to this. Tell us something that you're not going back to.
Senseless meetings. Y'all can go ahead now.
Overbooking so much.
The same, Dr. Thomas. I'm not going back to overbooking in anything, in work, in personal life, in church.
All right. So there you have it, Michelle. This has been an awesome conversation. Great way to start the Sabbath together. And we have 2 hours in, we have 22 more hours of the Sabbath to enjoy. And all the things that we've just talked about, I hope that we'll be able to apply. And I wish you all a wonderful, restful, re-energizing Sabbath with Jesus and family and relationships and maybe some drives if needed.
The leaves are out, Yeah, well, thank you so much all for joining us. I was furiously taking notes and I'm going to tweet, things throughout the week so other people can, so even more people can gather the tidbits that you've shared. So I really appreciate your time. And Pastor Graham, can you pray us out?
Sure will. God, we thank you so much just for the opportunity of prayer. And we have had our discussions with dealing with mental health. We ask you, God, that whatever we do, we make time for family, or more than that, we make time for you. What an awesome discussion. And we just ask you, Lord, if there's anyone who need you, that they may petition your throne of grace for your help. Not only help for the kingdom, but also if there's earthly help, doctors, therapists. Just ask you to open it up for us so that we can heal. We wait for you to come and save us so that we could live with you throughout the endless ages of eternity. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.